But before we get into all of that, we obviously have some housekeeping. So, summertime is a time to read and explore together. Summer Reading at QPL continues this month with a wide range of resources and activities for kids and adults, including programs for all ages, curated book lists for all reading levels, and much more. Learn more about summerreading.queenslibrary.org. Queens Public Library, along with the NYC Department of Education, provided free lunches for all, and it was through the ages of 18 and younger all summer long. The summer meals were offered from Monday through Friday from 1 p.m. to 2 through, and tomorrow will be our last day. So I just want to say thank you for everyone for participating all summer long for the free meals. There was no enrollment and there was no cost. You just had to drop by. So thank you again for taking part in the free summer meals. The school year is near and QPL is here to help you and your family get ready. So visit your local libraries for a list of upcoming fall events and to find out details about fun giveaways and much more. For more details, you can visit queenslib.org/blog. Thank you so much, guys. Take it away, Caspar.
Thank you, Simone. Yeah, it's so good to be here with everyone. So we have our special author, TJ Klune, who is a Lambda Literary Award-winning author and an ex-claims examiner for an insurance company. So that's exciting. His novels include The House in the Cerulean Sea and The Extraordinaries. Being queer himself, TJ believes it's important, now more than ever, to have accurate, positive, queer representation in stories. So we're so happy to have you with us, TJ. Welcome aboard.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to be able to talk to all of you. And no, being an ex-claims examiner is very much not interesting in any way, shape, or form.
So can you let us know what inspired you to write this book? Was there a particular experience or emotion that drove this story?
Yeah, so we're talking about The House in the Cerulean Sea here. Let me do something first. Let me just read you from the first page, just so you can hear it from me. Now, I want to say real quick though that if you actually want to hear somebody good at reading my books, listen to the audiobooks, because Daniel Henning is one of the best narrators I've ever had the pleasure to work with, and he brings these characters to life in ways that I will not. "Oh dear," Linus Baker said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "This is most unusual." That was an understatement. He watched in rapt wonder as an 11-year-old girl named Daisy levitated blocks of wood high above her head. The blocks spun in slow concentric circles. Daisy frowned in concentration. The tip of her tongue stuck out between her teeth. "And that is the water. All right." It went on for a good minute before the blocks slowly lowered to the floor. Her level of control was astounding. "I see," Linus said, furiously scribbling on his pad of paper. They were in the master's office, a tidy room with government-issued brown carpet and old furniture. The walls were lined with terrible paintings of lemurs in various poses. I forgot that line was in there. That's funny. The master had showed them off proudly, telling Linus that painting was her passion, and that if she hadn't become the master of this specific orphanage, she'd be traveling with a circus as a lemur trainer, or even have opened up a gallery to share her artwork with the world. Linus believed the world was better off with the painting staying in this room, but he kept that thought to himself. He wasn't there to engage in amateur art criticism. So, sorry, that lemur line just leapt out at me out of nowhere, and I was like, that is absolutely funny. So look, this book was written at a time when we were in a previous presidency that could potentially have a sequel to at some point in the near future. That felt like it felt like everything was on fire. It felt like the world, everything was just getting darker. No matter what you did, you turned on the news and you saw something bad happening everywhere. And unfortunately, that hasn't changed, but we can get into that later. But I wanted to do something different. I wanted to put a different kind of book out that I hadn't written before. And I knew it was going to involve magical children. I knew it was going to involve this orphanage. And I just had all of these pieces there that I wanted to put together. And I thought about a lot of myself growing up. I grew up in a home in rural Oregon below the poverty line in the 80s and the 90s that hated me for who I was. My parents hated me for who I was. And anything that brought me joy, such as books and writing, those were things that could be taken away if they knew about it. And that's what kind of household I grew up in. And so I know what it felt like to be othered. And knowing I was queer by age 10, 11, and this on top of undiagnosed ADHD, it creates a sense of otherness inside you that makes you feel like you can't relate to your peers in any way, shape, or form. And back then, I didn't have anybody like me in my life, in the world. I didn't even know that people like me existed. I thought I was broken. I thought there was something wrong with me. And for a long time, that's what I believed. And I know now in this time period that we live in now, there are people who still feel like that. There are people who are still out there living under the thumb of bigotry, whether it be homophobia, whether it be misogyny, whether it be transphobia, all the different kinds of things. There are still young people living under the thumb of that kind of fear every single day. So it's not as if being othered is a unique experience. It's not just queer people. People of color know what it feels like to be othered, and especially when you're a kid, because when you're a kid, kids don't have a filter that comes with age, and that's both good and bad. So you have kids that can say the funniest, most wonderful, crazy things, but kids can also sometimes be casually cruel without even necessarily knowing that they're being cruel. And so that's what I thought about a lot, about what would it be like if kids who are feared, kids who are othered, not because of their sexuality or because of how they look, but because of something they can do that sets them apart, something that makes them appear abnormal, something that makes them appear different than everybody else, how would that be perceived? How would that be looked upon? And unfortunately, this is a fantasy, and it involves characters like Lucy, who's the Antichrist, and Sal, who's a were-Pomeranian. But it is not that far from reality. It's really not that far from reality. And so after I came up with this idea of what I wanted to do, there's something that I always have to do first, and that is research, because I don't know anything about kids. I do not have children. I had not written necessarily for children before, and I wasn't necessarily even thinking about writing for children when I was writing this book. But I needed to know more, especially since Linus's job in this book is essentially akin to being a social worker. It's just with a different title, with a different governmental agency. So what did I do? I talked to social workers. I talked to parents who have fostered and adopted kids. I talked to people who have been adopted and fostered. I talked to queer people who have been in those situations before to see what kind of difference there was. And obviously there was a difference because everybody's journey is unique. But I heard from so many queer people who were in the foster system or who were waiting to be adopted, how much harder it was for them because they were queer and because they didn't fit in like everybody else did. And something else that I guess I was maybe not surprised by, but something that I did not really understand, I guess, before I went into this, is that I didn't know how severely underpaid social workers are. For the job that they have to do, for what they have to see day in and day out, for the horrors that they have to sometimes witness, it is mind-boggling that they are some of the most underpaid public servants who deal with trauma on a daily basis. And social workers that is not a long career for a lot of people. It's something that you get into because you want to make change, but you get so beaten down by the system and by not being able to do more that you leave and do other things. Luckily, in when I was writing the sequel 2 years ago, I got back in touch with those same social workers. I spoke with 5 of them for the first book. 2 had left social work. 3 were still in it, in the muck of it, and things have not improved. They're still underpaid. They're still short-staffed. They still don't have the resources that they really need to help as many people as they can. But you know what? They're still trying. They are absolutely still trying. And I learned during the process of writing this book that it takes a special kind of human being to do what they do. And I don't know that I would have the power over myself to do something like that. I am in awe of the empathy that those people in that line of work have to do what they do, because it is difficult, to say the least.
Question, like, how important is representation, or was representation, in writing this book? Because I love the fact that you were able to kind of like combine what is happening now to fantasy. So did you get comments in terms of coming from the queer community, like, it's so relatable, but I feel so much better now that you know that we're represented, that I find a character that represents me? Did you ever get that type of feedback?
I've gotten that constantly, many times, more times than I could possibly count. And look, I am so absolutely grateful for that. But here's the thing that I think about that a lot. Linus Baker, and I do not mean this in a pejorative sense in any way, shape, or form, he is a fat, fussy man in his 40s. How many characters like that get to be the heroes of books? How many characters like that get to have thinning hair and, you know, maybe not are happy with the way they're shaped, but by the end they realize that they needed to love themselves as much as they love everybody else. So this isn't a journey of Arthur going, or Linus going, oh, I need to be thinner, or I need to do this and this. He's the same outwardly at the end of the book as he is at the beginning of the book. That's what I loved hearing about. I loved hearing from okay, so let me do two things. One, I loved hearing from the youth, obviously hearing from young readers how much they loved reading this book, listening to the book, how it got them through hard times like the pandemic and all of that, because this book came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. But I want to focus on another subset of readers that I have. This subset of readers is older, gay, queer men in, say, 50s and older. I have received so many messages from men in that age group, or non-binary people in that age group, or queer women in that age group, who say they've never gotten to see themselves in books. They didn't know books like this existed. And I'm so happy to tell them there are so many books like this now. There are so many queer authors with beautifully done queer characters in the world. But it reminded me of when I was a kid, and how I never got to see myself in books unless it was an over-the-top offensive stereotype, or they were there to teach the straight characters a very valuable lesson, or we were there to get sick, or to get hurt, or to get murdered. The very first queer book that I read ended with one of the main characters, one of the two men whose love story you were following, gets murdered. That was the end of the book. This was written in the 70s. That was my first experience with queer literature. And then, you know, obviously something horrific happened in the 80s, which was the AIDS epidemic, which led to decades of AIDS fiction going through by queer men going through that at the time. And it didn't seem like we had a lot of room for queer joy. It didn't seem like we had a lot of room for queer happiness. So I wanted to make some room, and I'm so happy that I'm not doing it alone, because again, there are so many authors who are now seated at this table, making room for themselves, doing whatever they can, and it is remarkable.
Thank you for that, Caspar. So I'm going to read some comments in the chat. This one is coming from Nora. She says, good evening. I am so excited to be here tonight and to hear this talk. I taught at HITCS last year to 8th grade, and this year we're teaching it for the entire 6th grade. I would love to connect more. My students wrote you letters last year.
That is amazing. And thank you for that, Nora. I want to tell you something. I just got an email a couple of days ago from an educator who goes around the country working on anti-bullying campaigns. And she was at a school in, gosh, I think she said Nebraska, which, you know, you don't really hear a whole lot of stuff coming out of Nebraska. But she said that at the school, the kids were buzzing about how close the sequel to this book was. And she had written me years earlier to tell me about how every school she had visited, the kids were telling her to read The House in the Cerulean Sea until she finally picked it up and emailed me about it. And then she just followed up with me to let me know that the kids are chomping at the bit to get to the new one. And I have to tell you that I wish I could have had a teacher like you to teach me a book like this. But I will tell you one other thing, Nora. If you're anything like two teachers that I had in my past, your students are going to remember you for the rest of your life. The only reason that I'm here today is because of Mrs. Benson, Mrs. Pfeiffer, my 7th grade English teachers. They were the first people in my life to tell me I was good at something, and that happened to be writing. And in my very last class with them, they told me one day they would see my name on a book in a bookstore. It is because of them that I am here. So I am proof positive over the power that teachers have over their students. So if you are anything like them, your kids are going to remember you for the rest of their lives.
All right,
wow.
yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, we're
I
getting so
know.
much good feedback. Somebody says that's one of the reasons they love this book so much. We have Leah, and she's saying the characters in this book are so well fleshed out and unique. I once heard an author describe how her characters live with her, and she talks with them as she's writing. Do you experience something like similar with your characters, like they're talking to you?
Yeah, so here's the thing. I always say that when I was a kid, I had a choice. I could have either been a writer or psychotic because I hear voices in my head, and my voices are my characters that talk to me. Certain characters are louder than others, specifically Chauncey from The House in the Cerulean Sea. This guy right here, he is the loudest person in my head. He's my favorite character I've written, one of my favorite characters I've written, but in this series, he's my favorite, and he never shuts up. And I don't hear the Chauncey voice that I made up when I first started writing. Now I hear the Chauncey voice that's done by Daniel Henning, the audio narrator. So if you've listened to his version of the book, you will know exactly what goes on in my head, and it's very loud.
Okay, and then we have TJ. She says, was it The Front Runner? That was my
It
first queer
was,
novel.
yeah, the book, The
Picked up
Front Runner by
at my
Patricia
library's
Nell
Take a
Warren.
Leave.
Yeah, that was the book, The Front Runner by Patricia Nell Warren. It was the first critical and commercial gay novel, quote unquote, written. It came out in the 70s. Patricia Nell Warren was a straight white woman. But I have to tell you something. Shortly after my first book came out in 2011, Miss Nell Warren reached out to me because she had read it and had such lovely things to say. And trust me, it wasn't deserved. That first book that I wrote many, many years ago is really imperfect, but she had some lovely things to say. So of course I fangirled all over her and said, The Front Runner was the first queer novel I read when I was a kid. And she said, I am so sorry. And I was like, I got to know Miss Nell Warren a bit, and I actually got from one of my beta readers, Lynn, I have a signed first edition of The Front Runner proudly sitting on my shelf, because even though that book ended the way it did, it was still and is still to this day very important to me. Miss Nell Warren has since passed away, but if you are interested in that book ending, be damned, just know that she wrote 2 sequels to it as well, as kind of a, I don't want to say an apology, but as kind of she was very enmeshed in the queer community when she was alive, especially in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And she wrote the 2 sequels as a sort, I don't want to say an apology, but as a sort of, here you go, gays. And I loved her for it. But yeah, that was the book.
Let's see, we have another comment from Anna, and she says, since I saw your story on Instagram, I got so excited. You're my favorite author. When I read the book, I got transported with Linus and lived and loved all of the characters. I really love this book and all you've written. And somebody says that, thank you so much. My kids love the book. We're in New York City for our midpoint project. My kids were in the tech lab making your characters out of 3D pens and printers.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah. If you want, Nora, my contact is on my website. If you want to email me some photos, I'd love to take a look at those. That would be wonderful. I love seeing, here's one of my favorite things about books or about creativity is when creativity inspires creativity. I love that because it's like this that you throw a rock into a pond and you see the concentric circles go out. That's kind of like creativity. You can see it going out and hitting other people, and then maybe they want to do something creative. And that's just the coolest thing in the world to me. I love that.
We have Anna. Anna said last Halloween I disguised as Chauncey and everyone thought I was an alien.
I was just at Comic-Con in New York or in San Diego, and there were people cosplaying as characters from the book. I met a Linus and Arthur. I saw Chauncey, and somebody had done a little Theodore outfit with buttons in his mouth and everything like that. It was very cool.
And somebody says that it would be amazing to read some of your out of print works, like Burn, sequel or not.
Nope, that's not going to happen. And out of print, one is out of print, and that is because I took it out of print because it is not a good book. It is not a good book. I was too young. That was my second novel that I wrote when I was 28, 29. I'm like 42 now. I was too young. There was too many big ideas that did not land as well as, or even close to as well as they should have. It ends on a cliffhanger that I will never, ever go back to because I did not like writing that book. So sorry, it's not going to happen. But there are copies out there somewhere. I get people tagging me in posts all the time saying I found a copy on eBay or I found a copy in a bookstore.
So your book touches on love and acceptance, magic and reality, and social issues. And before we started the interview, you spoke about family and the fact that, you were not really supported as a child. Was this book sort of like therapeutic for you to kind of like heal and to create that your own acceptance?
Yes, writing has always been cathartic in that way. For example, moving away from The House in the Cerulean Sea for just a moment, the novel that came after The House in the Cerulean Sea is a book called Under the Whispering Door, which deals with grief and of death and a ghost who is not ready to move on. And I wrote that in after losing my partner in 2016. I wrote that book because I didn't understand why grief is the way it is. It affects everybody. If you live long enough to know what love is, you'll know loss at some point. But grief doesn't affect any people the same way. Everybody has a different reaction to grief, and I wondered why that was. So I wrote through it to try to understand that. The House in the Cerulean Sea, I know it started as just wanting to put a happy book out there, but I do think that part of it is, writing is therapeutic, and it certainly was being able to give characters like these, characters who aren't real but are very real to me, giving them hope that I never got, that so many people like me never got. I wasn't, let me walk that back just a sec. I wasn't necessarily thinking of myself, though I'm sure subconsciously I was. I was thinking about how would this hit with other people, or how do other people need this like I do? But I do think a part of it was, me thinking I wish I could have had something like this. I wish I could have escaped. I mean, how often were you when you're a kid? I remember reading books all the time saying, I wish I could go to Narnia. I wish I could go to Howl's Moving Castle. I wish I could go here so I didn't have to be where I was. I was one of those kids. And so, I get to write this book now. And though I wish that other kids didn't have to feel that way when they're reading a book, if they do, at least they'll have some comfort in these pages.
Thank you for that. Leah asks, I recall you saying years ago that you had not planned a sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea, that you liked where it ends. What changed your minds?
So, yes. So I wrote The House in the Cerulean Sea, Under the Whispering Door, and In the Lives of Puppets all before The House in the Cerulean Sea came out in 2020. So those three books were meant to be three standalones. Why? Because while I've written a lot of sequels, I don't like writing sequels and it's not because I get bored or anything like that. It's because I often find myself thinking of something really cool to do in a sequel, only to realize that I'm bound and constrained by the rules of the first book. So I can't do it. So sequels, you are trapped in the world that you created. So that being said, two things of note occurred that led to me wanting to write the sequel. First, something I mentioned previously, Chauncey never shuts up. Chauncey is always in my head. Chauncey is always talking about everything and anything. That is because he is Chauncey and he can do whatever he wants. So Chauncey's still there. And second, and more importantly, something has been happening across this country the last few years and over in the UK, other areas too, but specifically those two are the big regions now where this is occurring. There is a very rising anti-LGBTQ, specifically anti-trans movement that is occurring in our country. If you'll recall, there were a few years ago when parents and guardians of trans youth, trans people, and medical professionals who provide gender affirming care were called to testify, or were invited to testify in front of the government to speak their truth, about their lives, about their history, why, who they are, why protections are so important for this community who has one of the highest suicide rates out of everyone. And it is important that they spoke their truth. Unfortunately, they were met by politicians who questioned them about their minds, about their bodies, about their right to exist. They accused parents and guardians of trans youth of transing them, as if that's how that works. It's not, but that's what they were doing. And they accused medical professionals. Keep in mind, these are politicians, not doctors, but accusing medical professionals of indoctrinating, transing kids, going against Hippocratic oath, going against medical oaths, whatever, and basically forcing kids to be trans at the wanton whims of their parents or whatever. I hope I don't need to tell you all that is complete and utter BS, because that absolutely is BS. But I was horrified that these people who were so brave to get up there and talk authentically were then ambushed by politicians who are supposed to represent them, politicians who are supposed to represent their constituents, politicians who are getting rich, even though they all have a base salary that they're supposed to be making. That's what this was about. This was about this divide. Let me tell you, I'm going to say something that some of you might not agree with, but I believe it wholeheartedly. This so-called transphobic thing that we're going through right now, it's a moral panic on par with the satanic panic of the 80s. In that, there's nothing there. There is nothing there. I remember 15 years ago, around 15 years ago, remember on People magazine where they posted that first pregnant man, a trans man, had gotten pregnant, and everybody didn't treat it as disgusting, ew, gross. At worst, they maybe treated it as an oddity. At best, they were like, wow, that's cool. So why have we gone from that point to here now? Why are we doing this trans panic? It blows my mind that is what we are spending our time arguing about. Something that is less than 1% in a population, and you're choosing to go after them. And then I remembered at the very end of the House in the Cerulean Sea, Arthur was invited to testify in front of the government. And I thought, what if that was an ambush? That's what led to the sequel. In addition to one very important thing, all these decisions are being made on behalf of children, what books they can read, who their classmates are. But kids today are smarter, more worldly than we ever were at their age. They can access any piece of information known to humankind from a device in their pocket. And if you don't think they're paying attention, oh boy, are you wrong. I have spent my career, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, talking to kids all over the world. Not only do they pay attention, not only do they know about their trans classmates being targeted and the books being removed from their schools and decisions being made within their classrooms that affect them directly, not only do they know about wars and genocides going on around the world right now, they pay attention, and they're going to be the future. Man, I know the old adage is kind of cliche that the kids are going to be all right, but the kids are going to be all right because they're going to fix everything. They're going to make this broken world a much better place. So why is nobody asking the kids what they think? If we are so focused on making them these little people controlling their every little move, why aren't we asking them what they think if we know they're so smart? That is why the sequel exists.
Wow, that's amazing. And thank you for that. Thank you for being so raw in your responses as well. So we have a comment from Eleanor, and Eleanor says, I love your work, TJ. I'm doing the house on the cover of House in the Cerulean Sea as my final assignment before I graduate high school.
Hell yeah, good job. I hope you do well, and you got this. You got this.
And then we have from Erica. Erica asks, any advice to writers who want to do their first fiction novel?
Yeah, so look, advice from writers is a dime a dozen. Why? Because every writer does things differently. So I'm going to try to keep things as generic as possible because you need to find what works for you. Couple of things. Read as much as you write. Read everything. Read fiction, read nonfiction, read genres that you've never read before. Why? Because it'll help you find your voice. By learning how other authors write, it helps you to write. 2, this might seem kind of weird coming from me as a traditionally published author. You know what's a good way to practice writing? Fan fiction. You want to know why that's a good way to write? Because you already have a preset world with preset characters, and you can work, instead of on just world building, you can work on things like dialogue, how actually people sound. Because how many times have you read a book and someone speaks and you're like, no human being would ever speak like that. That's not how human mouths work. That realistic dialogue is so important. I myself try to read all my dialogue out loud so I can know how it sounds to make sure it sounds like a human being. 3rd, so you got read, got that one. 3rd, if you hit a block, say you're writing and you hit a writer's block kind of thing where it feels like it's tough to go on, do not try to force yourself through that, because you're only going to end up making yourself angrier. And the angrier you get, the worse you're going to like what you're doing. Take a step back. Take a break. Sometimes all you need to do is take a walk. Sometimes you just need to come back the next day. One time I had a writer's block so bad that I quit, that I stopped writing that book, went and wrote a whole other book, then came back to that first book and realized, oh, that's where I went wrong. I was able to finish it. Don't try to force yourself through something like that, because it's only going to hurt that much worse. And that was 1, 2, 3. Let me give you one more piece of advice for if you want to be a writer. Never, ever, listen to me here when I say this. Never, ever believe that there is one way to write, that you have to follow the rules of writing, quote unquote. There are rules in science fiction and fantasy that have been for straight white men for however many decades. And guess what? It is more fun to come in and blow up all those rules and make it your own. That's what you should do. Be unique. Write the stories you want to read. Don't go chasing trends. Look, romantasy, oh, it's a big thing right now. What it's going to be in 2 years. 3 years or 2 years ago, cozy fiction is everywhere. This is cozy. We need cozy. Don't write to chase trends. Write what you want to read, and your audience will find you.
Oh, thank you, TJ. And I guess continuing in that line of thought, I'm gonna skip a couple of comments, but somebody writes, "Hi, TJ. I'm wondering what advice you might give to an aspiring queer author where visibility is concerned. It can be a bit daunting to think about, even if unapologetic queerness is the end goal."
It can be daunting to think about, especially because online there are going to be people who hate you simply for existing. I get that all the time. I get death threats from right-wingers. I get death threats from readers. I get death threats all over the place. You have to have a thick frickin' skin and realize the issue is not you, it's them. They're the ones that are yelling at you from behind their anonymous accounts, getting upset about this and this and this. Surround yourself by others from your community. There are so many queer writing conglomerates, either online or if you're in a big area, you can meet with somebody there. But that's one thing I wish I had done differently. Writing can sometimes feel it is extraordinary solitary, because usually it's you and your thoughts. A lot of people think writing is all I do. No, writing is maybe 20%. The other is marketing. And then the most of it is thinking. That is my job, is to think and how I want to put together words. I wish I had, when I first started, a group to bounce ideas off of. I wish I had done that when I had first started, because I think it would have made me a better writer. So if you have that available to you, either online or in your area, go to something like that. Don't be shy. It can be daunting, but here's the thing. The only thing that's holding you back is you. So get over yourself and get out there, because it's not going to happen if you don't do it.
Just yes.
Nice.
Oh, Sorry, to start your book, the first chapter, like the first scene, it's lemurs. Why lemurs? Like I was cracking up. I was
I
like,
don't
lemurs?
know. I
And
can't
I'm
even
looking at
remember
the
why that
pictures. I'm
was.
like, does he love lemurs? I'm like, I see no lemurs.
I don't know. That's why it caught me off guard when I read that, because I forgot I put that line in there. Look, I love. Okay, you know what? I probably at best I can explain it. Do y'all know the show Bob's Burgers? Bob's
Yes,
Burgers
I
is one
do.
of my favorite TV shows in the world. The deadpan humor, and I can just picture somebody. And you know what? I can almost picture Bob as Linus, and I can just see him making in that flat monotone he does. Labors. I can just see him doing that. that was a terrible impression. No, no, don't nobody laugh at that. That was horrible. So yeah, that's why I can see. That's why it's lemurs, just because ADHD. It's one of those things. It's like, you know what's funny? Lemurs, and then it just goes back in my head.
Okay, makes sense, kind
Yeah,
of.
kind of.
Okay,
Yeah, so-
so we have some more questions. This is from Andy. I absolutely love Chauncey. Every time I see his plushie, my heart melts. I've never seen a character with a dream like his. Love it. How did you find his unique personality and that dream of being a bellhop?
So when you're a kid, you don't have that filter of cynicism that comes with age. You have all of these swirling thoughts and emotions as you basically become sentient, as you basically come online at like age 3. You're like, here's consciousness. I have a sense of id and ego and sense of self. I don't know what any of it means, but let's go. So with Chauncey in particular, it took from what I was like as a kid, where you get that one thing that captures your attention, it becomes your entire personality. For me, it was archaeology. And the reason being was because I wanted Dr. Indiana Jones to be my boyfriend. And I also wanted to go on archaeological adventures. And then I saw the movie Alien. And instead of taking the right lessons from that and saying, no, we should stay out of space, I wanted to become a space archaeologist and go into space and excavate cultures from that are dead and gone and disappeared alien worlds and stuff like that. I just remembered how that felt. I read books on archaeology. I read books on space. It became everything I did for a long time. That's kids, man. And that's what Chauncey is. Chauncey, one day it popped into his head that the coolest thing in the world a person could be was a bellhop. And guess what? He set out to do just that. He read books on it. He practiced. And guess what? He became a bellhop. That is amazing. That is stick-to-itiveness. That is Chauncey reaching for the stars. And you know what? To a lot of people, that might not be a big thing. But to a kid, that's everything.
Thank you. And somebody, I think Will writes, one of my favorite bits of promotion for one of your books was the obituary for Wallace Price and Under the Whispering Door. Do you have a favorite bit of promo for this upcoming book?
For the upcoming book, yes. So I went to New York City a couple of months ago to go meet with my publisher to talk about plans for the sequel coming out. But at the same time, Daniel Henning, my audio narrator, was there doing the recording for the sequel, Somewhere Beyond the Sea. So I got to spend time with Daniel, and there's a bunch of videos coming out with me and him talking about the recording of the book, talking about the book itself. And you're all going to see that Daniel Henning is one of the craziest, coolest, most unique individuals you will ever get to know. And I swear to God, every time I meet him, I don't learn more about him. I learn new lore about him, because he is like this force to be reckoned with. And he doesn't tell you info. He drops lore about himself.
I do you think that because your books are so amazing, but do you think because of you still have that childlike wonder that
Mhm.
just you look at you and you still look as though you're a child, like when you start moving your
Well,
animated.
that's because I have a very good skincare routine that is very expensive. And 2, that is because I think a large part of it is because I never got to be a kid. I never
Right.
got to be a child. I never got to have moments where I didn't have to look over my shoulder and worry that something was coming. And so I don't think that I had that, but I don't think it ever went away as I got older. And I think it became part of my imagination. It's what, okay, look, I have many, many faults. I am a problematic person,
You're not
but
perfect.
here's the thing. I love my imagination. I love how I can speak to so many different people through putting certain words in a certain order. I love that I get to make people laugh and cry and think and get angry and say I hate this book and throw it across the room. I love that I get to do all of that because it shows just how varied and vast we all are. And it's just, I hope I never stop being like I am because I like me. For a long time I didn't, but I do now.
And it translates and it transcends. You're
Well,
awesome.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Someone asks, well, they say I've read Under the Whispering Door and it was brilliant and warm. Thank you for that book. Read it during the roughest political ugliness and it helped. And they ask, how do you recharge your spirit during this political season?
If you had asked me this message 2 months ago, I would have said I don't have any spirit during this season because look, we're fighting between two old white men who are somehow still alive. Hooray! But obviously things have changed since then. And look, I'm not going to you can vote how you want for. That's what's great about this country. But just know that voting for one is going to lead to things like, oh, I don't know, Roe v. Wade being dropped, or it's going to lead to things like, oh, I don't know, same-sex marriage being dropped when more than one justice have already signaled that they think it oversteps and people said that Roe v. Wade was not going to fall. So why would you think Obergefell wouldn't fall when it's only 9 years old? So just think about what not just for the next 4 years, there's a very likelihood that in the next 4 years, several Supreme Court justices will either, go by way of wherever, or they will retire and they're going to have to be replaced. So who do you want representing you? But I want to say, as someone who has been around 4 decades and who has been tried to be as political as I can, because let's face it, many others have made my entire existence a political talking point. That this feels to me like how it felt in the lead up to Obama's election. There's a energy that barely won us in 2020 that is now on fire. And I hope that continues. I hope that persists. And I hope that one day very soon we have our first Madam President. And we can all take a sigh of relief because maybe that will mean Republicans will be like, oh no, we lost again. Better stick with Trump some more. Or maybe, I hope they won't. I hope they'll be like, okay, well, let's go back to being moderately evil, not evil. So.
Okay, so we have a comment from Rupert, and Rupert says last school year we had a book project where we had to make a food truck based on the book we read. So I picked The House in the Cerulean Sea because it was and still is one of my favorite books. We made a model food truck, menu and food for it, and I still have all that stuff from it. The book, along with many of your other books, has been very impactful for me because I've had such a hard time finding books with good representation in genres I like. And I especially appreciate inclusion of found families in many of your works. I feel so lucky to have initially been suggested your books by the mom of one of my friends. Thanks for listening to a young queer guy talk about it, how awesome your books are. Yay.
Rupert, you're awesome as my books. You might be even more awesome than my books. That food truck thing, man, that is the freaking coolest thing I've ever heard of. What the heck? See, this is what I was talking about. Creativity inspiring creativity. Art inspiring art. That is so freaking cool, man. Let's keep it going. Keep making more things. And then, gosh, that'd be so cool. See, I've often said, I don't like people, but I love humanity because humanity gave us books and music and art and movies and dancing and all of this wonderful thing. People just suck.
Yeah, and speaking of music and dancing, the next question is, so many of your books include characters listening to music and dancing in the kitchen, which I love. What's currently your favorite kitchen dancing music?
Oh no! That is a very specific question that is very pointed, and I'm going to have to give you an answer that I wish I didn't have to give, because just today I was emptying my dishwasher, listening to Everybody Backstreet's Back by the Backstreet Boys and dancing while I put away spoons. Are you happy now? Are you happy that you made me say that in public? My reputation, no!
Oh, next comment is Anna, and she said, I know I have said this many times, but I'm truly very grateful to you and your incredible book that managed to get me out of a very difficult time in my life. I felt accompanied and understood. Thank you, TJ.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. You are more than welcome, and go out into the world and do amazing things.
And then we have from Teresa, didn't think I could love this man I never met before. I never met more. I'm sure I know she's meant before. Proud Clunatic.
Clunatic, yeah.
Yeah. Are there any plans to revisit Green Creek?
Absolutely not, Proud Clunatic. I gave those 4 books. I gave you 4 books with those. Those 4 books were filled with angst and suffering and horrible things happening to good people, and I don't want to put them through any more stuff. I gave them the hard-fought ending that they deserved in the final book. To go back, I think, would mess that up. And I love how things ended. The wolves from that series, from that book, those are all gone asleep. They are gone for me. And though I spent 10 years with them. I wrote that first book back in 2014. 10 years, and I couldn't ask for a better experience. But it's time to sometimes know when you have to let things go, and it's time to say goodbye to certain things, and I know that's one of them where I'll never go back to it.
And that's amazing. So when you stop hearing the characters, when you stop hearing their voices, does that mean that's when you stop, when you know it's time to give rest, and I don't need to do this anymore?
Yeah, that's I know how. Yeah, except for Chauncey. Holy crap, dude! But that's how I know there. I know there will never be a sequel to Under the Whispering Door, even though I know of an idea that could easily be a sequel. I don't want to because of how much the book meant to me to write to begin with, but B, I love how it ends. In the Lives of Puppets easily could be a sequel with many things happening from many different angles or perspective. But again, I love how that book ends. I love how it is not tied up in a neat little bow, because that's life. Yes, still questions remain, but just know that these people will find those answers no matter where they go, because they'll have each other. That's just how it is. I thank them for the time they spent with me, and for the most part, they all just go back to sleep.
And this is why we love doing Literary Thursdays, because we get a little glimpse into the minds of authors and get the little tricks of why things end and why things continue.
I won't show you my very scary, crazy wall over here. That, the meme that you see online from Charlie, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he's standing in front of the conspiracy wall and he's smoking a cigarette like this, and the lines are all stretched. I have a wall that kind of looks like that for my books.
Actually, we did see a award from an author who did that as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to show you mine, because I'd like for you guys to think I'm at least a little bit sane. So let me have that.
Okay. Andy says, thank you for making Gordon Livingston so hot.
You are absolutely welcome, Andy. I also think he is very, very attractive.
And Hodges says, TJ, OMG, everybody is on my Spotify playlist, and my ADHD brain plays it on repeat.
I know, but here's the problem part. I also remember some of the dance from the music video, so that's what I was doing. And if you think that all queer men can dance, let me tell you what, I am not one of them. I kind of move like I'm a golden retriever with hip dysplasia.
I'm sure it's not that bad.
Okay.
Listen, don't start to lose your cool points with your readers, please. Oh, Erica says, I love Bob's Burgers. Who's your fave character? I'm a Tina girl.
Gene will always be my favorite because he is just the weirdest and most I can't remember what they're called, but okay, this is random. I'm sorry, tangent. When I was young, we went to stay with my step grandparents one time, and they had a foreign exchange teacher from Japan staying with them. And she had this keyboard, this little pink keyboard that was like that big and about that wide, but it had like a thing that came out, a tube that you would blow into the keyboard, and that's how it would play. Gene has one of those from Bob's Burgers, and I was like, oh my God, do you know my childhood? What is this? So yes, that's why he's my favorite, because I played that exact instrument many, many times really badly.
And Tash asks a random question. I feel like you'd be a Hamilton fan. Are you?
I have never seen Hamilton, though I have met Lin-Manuel Miranda one time, and I didn't know who he was. I felt bad.
So how many revisions did you go through before the final manuscript was complete? What was the most challenging part of the revision process?
The first book, House in the Cerulean Sea, the very first chapter that I read, introducing where Linus was with the girl named Daisy who levitated blocks, that didn't exist. The first time that Arthur, or the chapter of the book was the very first chapter where we meet Arthur, and he's being invited, or he's being accosted by Miss Jenkins. That was the first chapter. What the editor suggested was, my editor, who I've since worked on every single other book with because she's my favorite human being in the world, she suggested that we see Linus actually doing his job before, so we know what kind of a person he is before. In addition, there is a scene in The House in the Cerulean Sea where Linus and Arthur go to face the people of the village who are ready to storm the island towards the end. That was not in the original manuscript. My editor wanted not to increase action, because that's never the point of these books, but she wanted to raise the stakes just a little bit. And that pays off, because we get to see these same townsfolk in the sequel suddenly unburdened by all their bigotry and their fear and their hatred. And now there are people who are trying to make amends and trying to help out. And you're going to see characters who acted like jerks in this book towards this family make amends and try to be better in the sequel, because that's what it's about. Yes, not everybody can become better. Some people actively choose not to, but I choose to believe that there are so many more who are essentially misinformed, or even worse, maybe brainwashed from when they were kids, and were taught certain things. Hate is taught. Hate is a learned behavior. When you hate other people for who they are, the groups that they are, it's a learned behavior. So I think that it's fascinating to be able to hold these two books together now and see a complete journey for some of the background characters who you wouldn't think would get a complete journey.
Thank you for that. So we are nearing the 7 o'clock ending of this program. So I would like to ask you, what kind of things are you working on now? What future projects can we look forward to? And I always ask this to all the authors: can me and Simone be in the movie?
Yes.
Simone.
Simone, would you like to play Zoe in the movie? You could be the Sprite Queen. So let me say this. I have another book coming out on February 15th, or February 4th. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said 15th. February 4th. It is a queer action thriller that is basically, what if it was E.T., but sexier and gayer? So that's what I did. So that's a completely different kind of book. That is a book more geared towards adults, because it is, again, explosions, guns, black helicopters, chasing queer people and a little girl that they're sworn to protect because she might be something special. After that, next fall, I have a book coming out that hasn't been announced yet, but I will say this, it is my first non-human main character.
Wow.
And it is a joyous, joyous, joyous book that is based upon my love of such films as Homeward Bound and The Adventures of Milo and Otis that I loved when I was a kid. So
Yeah.
yes, you might have guessed that the main character in this book is a dog. You'd be correct. After that, I have a couple of things already written, a couple of things in the works that I can't wait to announce. Hopefully someday soon we'll be able to announce stuff about adaptations and potential. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. All that kind of stuff takes a very, very, very long time. But just know this, that I still, at age 42, have a billion ideas in my head that I will never have enough life to get down. So I hope you like books from me, because I will continue doing this until my fingers fall off.
We hope so. So we're also approaching banned books. Are there any banned books that you are?
Yes, absolutely. I have it right here. This is one of my most favorite books in the world. It is Flamer by Mike Curato. It is a graphic novel that uses color very sparingly, but only red in certain passages to designate fire, anger.
Right.
If I had had this book when I was a kid, a queer kid, my life would have been so much different. The book is blurbed by Jarrett Krzoska. This book will save lives. I absolutely, wholeheartedly agree. Please, everybody, this is one of the most banned books in the United States. It typically tops lists, along with Juno Dawson's This Book is Gay, and what is it? The memoir written by George, The Flowers Are All Blue, something like that. I apologize for mispronouncing that one, but one of the most banned books in the United States. Read it, love it. It is extraordinary.
Thank you. So, Casper, any last words?
No, thank you, Simone. Thank you. TJ, was a great program. We were so happy to have you. We have like a record turnout with over 50 people. So we're really happy to have you. And since you're working on so many projects, we hope we can have you back again soon.
All you have to do is ask. Like I told Simone, I go to war for 3 groups of people: nurses, teachers, and librarians. When I was a kid, the librarian was my safe space. My librarian was the first person I came out to. So trust me when I say I will go to war for libraries any day of the week. All you have to do is call me. I will show up looking pretty cute, so you'd be welcome.
And yes, I've had kids come out to me too. So yes, I totally agree with you. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit with us and to sit with your audience and your fans. Thank you, audience, so much for coming and joining Queens Public Library Literary Thursdays.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you, TJ. See you soon.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.